How it started is that we started off as having a team meeting and talking about our childhood experiences of schools, really. And I got everybody to bring in a photograph of when they were at school. Now, some people found that actually quite uncomfortable, really, because some had positive experiences, some had quite negative experiences of schools.
We actually brought our own experiences of school as a terms of team development and sort of like peer supervision, I suppose you'd call it. You know, we all brought in old school reports and pictures of us at school, and you know, said how we enjoyed school and how we didn't. Majority of us enjoyed school, which is quite surprising when most of the parents we speak to never did.
Because there is no educated social work.
I think it brought us together as well slightly, you know, sharing experiences about school.
And we then looked at our practice and how that impacted on our own practice and how we felt about certain kids. We then started asking parents of what their experiences of schools, and the parents who had children with poor attendance seemed to have very poor experiences of schools.
It was just something we sort of came upon by just talking to the parents and chatting to them when we went to do that first visit, and it sort of opened a gateway in for us to understand the parents for where they were coming from.
So I went away and thought, there's something in this, in terms of, well, one, giving the parents a voice, and about actually does that impede the parents allowing their children to go to school, really. And we didn't do anything about it for quite a bit of time, really. And then we chatted again with the team, because we've had quite a lot of staff changes, about them, seeing if they can ask that as a systematic question, really. Because I was actually on the course with research in practice, I actually went away and looked to see what research evidence was around, and struggled a bit with that because we sort of sit in education and social services. There's a lot of research evidence from social services about parents' poor parenting experiences impacting on how they were as parents, but not about the education perspective. So I sort of got a bit stuck, really, about that and stopped doing anything for a bit, really. And then we discussed it again as the team, because the team has started asking questions to parents. So we sat down and said, actually, we think this can improve our practice. We think we can achieve change better if we have some understanding of parents, and we think we can inform schools about how parents feel.
It's an area it doesn't seem to be a great deal of research about.
I think I found maybe two articles on a website. I think that was it, out of so many tries on Google and what have you. I found it very hard to find anything that related to what I was trying to look for.
Sally, our team leader, has been trying to find some research about it, and we've had odd papers handed to us where there's articles in newspapers or articles in magazines, but we don't seem to find any documented research about parents' experience of schools and how it impacts on their child's attendance.
When we started doing this, and I think it's been done more informally than overtly, one of my workers was starting the first year degree course. I'd got somebody that was unqualified but very keen to learn. I'd got somebody who just qualified as a social worker, and so we were all in a learning environment anyway.
We discussed this through team meetings, but there was discussions at the sink while we were making coffee, or if we were out walking into town together, we would share bits that we've picked up. There is a crossover of families. They might have a child in a secondary school that's allocated to me, but a younger child in a primary school that's allocated to someone else. So we constantly having to share information.
So everybody just took it on board, really. So it wasn't, and the other advantage is, because we sit slightly outside social services, there wasn't any bureaucratic, I decided we wanted to do it, so we just did it.
We do home visits just to get the dialogue going between the service and the parents, and then our aim is to get the dialogue going between the parents and the school. A lot of the children were unaware of what their parents' experience of schools were, and so by talking about that and saying to children, that their mum and dads or carers at that time had similar experiences, sort of opened a bit more dialogue between the child and that parent, and a bit more understanding for both the parent and the child.
One of my workers was discussing a case of a child that the parent was perceived that he was bullied in school, which actually wasn't the case. And she'd actually asked him what his childhood experiences at school, which were fairly poor, and he'd experienced a lot of bullying. And she did some work with him about reflecting on how that was for him.
Dad was prosecuted for non-school attendance. His son's attendance was probably like 14% for the whole year. And just by asking him, you know, how was school for you? He told me he had a terrible time. He'd moved around a lot, different schools, found it hard to settle. And he's just like, I'm not having my son have a bad time at school. So he was also intimidated by the school itself. He was always very anxious about coming into school. And when he did come into school, he would get angry with the staff.
Which I think we felt was a defence mechanism. And what it has achieved is this child has gone back to school, but it's given everybody and the team a greater understanding about why that was, really.
And he's coming round a little bit, he's opening up a little bit and talking about himself, whereas before the perception of Dad is that he was just an angry man, nobody knew why. And his son's now been in, I think, 95% so far since September.
And also I think it helped Dad move forward in terms of his understanding about his childhood experiences impacting on his child's education, really, and could be a bit more objective about that he needed to move forward, really.
I was intrigued because, to know about the sort of correlation between, parents' experience and what their children are going through. And it's surprising the amount of parents that I have asked that question to. I'd say a huge majority of them have actually had a poor experience at school.
I think for me, and it's something again that we need to build in the framework of team, I think it would inform the actions of the assessment, so about how motivated parents are to change, what is their ability to change. It's that sort of assessment that I think it informs more than anything else, really. And I think even if we don't achieve change and we do have to prosecute, there's a sense that we've been sort of honesty and given parents a voice, really.
I think that there does need to be more research done on the subject, because there really is such a strong correlation of, poor school attenders and the experiences of their parents. It's very, very strong, very strong. I just think a little bit more research, a little bit more reading, and I'd be able to share it with parents then. Let them know it's not a common thing. It's a national experience.
I think the main values is that it gives parents a voice within the assessment process. It gives us a greater understanding of why children don't attend school, and that may be another dimension to it that we hadn't actually heard before, or we'd heard it in terms of, yes, you had difficult experiences at schools, but actually, what does that actually mean? I think for me, I've stood back and related it more to some social work theories and attachment theories about people's internal working models, really, and about how they're set up and patterns are set up, and how that either confirms or disconfirms our identity and our children's identity. And I'm sure there's more work that needs to be done on that in terms of informing practice, and that's something that I want to move forward with a couple of our workers that we've got who are going on to doing their post-qualifying award, and maybe they can incorporate some of that within some of their assessment at university stuff, and things like that might be quite useful.
But what I think would be really good is to build up maybe a leaflet, or write a paper or something on this subject, and actually not only share it with parents but share it with schools or professionals, like your Social Work Today journal or something. I think it needs predominantly to be put in social work circles, not just education circles. I think, for a good understanding from all walks, really.
I think what I need to do, and it's useful talking here, is actually to be much more overt and clear what we do and actually pull it all together, because I think we've done more than we think we've done and moved a lot more forward than we think we have, and we haven't given ourselves any credit for that, really.